Here's everything you need to know about the future of the DC Universe. Recently, an article came out detailing insider information on the new DC Universe reboot. And with the new Superman film, Easter eggs, future projects, and most interestingly, how Batman and Superman could finally share the screen together after almost 10 years. There's so much to break down. So as always, timestamps will be linked in the description down below. And also in the comments, let me know how you think the future of the DC Universe should be handled. But let's talk about it. We have to start with the conversation of a potential world's finest. 3 years ago, we got Robert Pattinson as Batman, and now we have David Cornsweet as Superman. Two completely different characters in two completely different worlds, and we've never seen not only a world's finest story, but really pretty comic accurate simultaneous adaptations of these characters until now. And if you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you know I'm a massive fan of the Batman. I've seen this film over like 13 times. It's one of my favorite films of all time. I think everything about that film is absolutely perfect. And I've also said a million times on the channel how I want them to keep Matt Reeves' Batman universe completely separated from anything DC universe related. When they announced / brought up the idea of Batman Brave and the Bold with Robin and a different Batman, I don't really like the Andy Muschietti directorial choice, but still, a different Batman for this Superman, I thought that was the best way to go. You know, I did think it would be a little over convoluted, but I want to keep the Batman. I want to keep that universe. I don't want them to cancel it. And if two simultaneous Batmans is the only way we can do that, fine by me. But I don't know if it's the million TikTok edits I've seen or just the way that James Gunn was able to build out such a vibrant and exciting and new and fresh take on Metropolis. But I kind of could see these worlds in the same universe opposite each other. Now, I don't really want this. I don't think that I want this, but the little part in the back of my mind is kind of like, why don't we take advantage of the fact that we have two of the greatest comic book castings of all time? They are two of the faces of the DC universe, and they're kind of right there. Now, I do think 99% of the ways to execute this are where they could go completely wrong. And first of all, do I genuinely think this is going to happen? Not with Matt Reeves in the picture. Now, we don't really know what's happening with Matt Reeves behind the scenes. We don't know why the Batman Part 2 took so long to get into production. We don't know why it's been taking so long in general for the Matt Reeves Batman universe to move forward. Because when the original film came out, it seemed like everything was moving at a very brisk pace, and then the Penguin took a while to get out. Obviously, Batman Part 2's script just got turned in almost 3 to 4 years after the original film came out, not even when they started production. Since the film came out, I think first and foremost, it is Matt Reeves' option. I think James Gunn would respect that, and I think that's why the Batman Part 2 has taken so long. I also have a little theory, and a couple of people online have talked about this, about how James Gunn has kind of been pushing off the Batman because originally when he took over the DC universe, maybe it was their original concept idea to merge the two universes, and maybe that was a problem, or they wanted to see the success of Superman and then start working on the Batman to kind of see how that all pans out and see if they can merge the two, because obviously you don't want to mesh a very successful Batman movie with the very poorly performing Superman movie. All of that aside though, I'm talking strictly on an adaptation or a story level. I think this is kind of perfect. I think a really interesting general timeline of how they could connect these worlds, and let me know if you agree in the comments or how you would do it in an alternate way, but I think you finish out the Matt Reeves trilogy in terms of giving him a concise story. If the Batman Part 2 comes out in 2027, we could get this trilogy done by 2030, and I think that gives you enough time to also throw in maybe a Penguin Season 2 if that's what they want to do, but also just 2 more Max shows, which I would actually love to see. That was the most interesting part of Matt Reeves is the Batman universe, in my opinion, is movies and shows interconnected. And we also know that the DC universe is doing that, and later in this video we'll actually be talking about all of the projects and stuff like that, so stay tuned for that. But as a fan of the Batman universe thus far, I think they should just finish that story out, give it as much time as it needs. You can even do another Superman film. You don't have to wrap up his trilogy. Maybe Superman, like David Cornsweet, Superman's 3rd film, could be world's finest between him and Batman. But okay, timeline aside, again, I think that's the best way to execute it, just to kind of play out both visions of the story. And then once Matt Reeves kind of steps back, you take this phenomenal casting of Robert Pattinson and you can kind of implement this amazing Gotham into this other world of Metropolis. And that's what I want to get into now. I genuinely just think aesthetics wise and story wise, character wise, thematically, after rewatching Superman for a second and third time, the amount of parallels between these characters are absolutely insane. And It's really hard for me to believe, as a huge fan of both of these films, both of these castings, and both of these worlds, that it wasn't done without intention from James Gunn. I mean, the biggest core plot they changed of Superman's character was making his original Kryptonian parents somewhat evil, and that is exactly what Matt Reeves does in The Batman.
But when the reporter refused, Wayne turned to longtime secret associate Carmine Falcone and had him murdered. The Waynes and the Arkhams, Gotham's legacy of lies and murder.
Both adaptations are also very focused on splitting the personalities between Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne and Batman and Superman, and I think they do it to humanize the characters even more than we've seen before. These are all character writing and overall story developments that just make the characters richer, and again, paralleling them to their past versions. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but obviously I could talk about Batman and Superman for hours on end. I genuinely just think aesthetics-wise and character-wise, these two would be a pretty great match. The final thing I want to talk about in regards to Batman before getting into the DC Universe Insider Breakdown article is what James Gunn said about Batman in general with the DC Universe. In a Deadline article, we found out James Gunn says Batman is his biggest issue in the DC Universe. I think I have a way in. So in a Q&A with Rolling Stone, James Gunn said that there is a very little chance that Robert Pattinson's Batman would enter the DC Universe that's been established by this Superman. I would never say zero, because you just never know, but it's not likely. It's not likely at all. I'll also say Batman Part 2 is not canceled. That's the other thing I hear all the time, that Batman Part 2 is canceled. It's not canceled. We don't have a script. Matt's slow. Let him take his time. Let him do what he's doing. And then we get actually really our first details on the Batman Brave and the Bold, where they say Gunn is working on Batman Brave and the Bold, a separate film about the Gotham City Protector alongside an undisclosed writer. Andy Muschietti is still set to direct. He was actually at the Superman world premiere, which kind of pissed me off because I do not want him to direct this character. Now, this is really interesting in terms of the tone of Batman, and I think why there's still a potential of James Gunn implementing the DC Universe's Batman with the Matt Reeves' Batman, where he says, but because there's a need for him in the DC Universe, and a need that he's not exactly the same as Matt's Batman, but yet he's not a campy Batman. I'm not really interested in that. I'm not interested in a funny, campy Batman, really, so we're dealing with that. I think I have a way in, by the way. I just think I know what it is. I'm dealing with the writer to make sure we can make it a reality. That's the thing. I genuinely just think they're too torn between getting too deep into the Matt Reeves version of Batman, which is a pretty normal version of Batman, but really there's only two sides to Batman. And if you're doing two simultaneous adaptations, you genuinely don't want them to be way too similar. I completely understand why James Gunn is frustrated, because you're working in the bounds of trying to make a new version of this character, while arguably the best version of all time already exists simultaneous to you. So now I want to get into this really beefy DCU insider article. So the Wall Street Journal recently released an article saying, saving a studio, this looks like a job for Superman. The way I kind of want to go through it is I made a list of really cool things in this article that I want to talk about, but I'll link the article in the comments down below, just so if there's other things you want to look through and I missed out on it, you can definitely check it out. But getting into actually the repercussions of Superman story-wise, James Gunn did say that he is considering spin-offs for characters like Mr. Terrific and Jimmy Olsen. Now to get to the future of the DC Universe. According to this article, James Gunn and Peter Safran halted most of the DC projects in development, including a third Wonder Woman starring Gal Gadot set in the present day, in order to create their own film and TV universe. Their goal isn't just consistent success, but more narrative unity. In the past, wildly different approaches to the big screen Joker, HBO's Watchmen series, and CW's network's Arrow left DC without a coherent public identity. The second part is interesting, but I'll get there in just a second here. I do see this, but I also don't want them to kind of have everything DC related be like, oh, okay, like we're doing a Teen Titans here, so we can't do like a children's animated Teen Titans or something. You know what I mean? Like, I get it with like the Arrow thing and like super big essential characters, but even with Joker, I don't mind that we got like a Joaquin Phoenix Joker 2019. Now, Joker Fully Do absolutely sucks, but I'm saying the first film. And this especially comes into play with HBO's Watchmen, which is one of my favorite limited series of all time. I don't think it's perfect, but it is one of the most interesting DC brand projects of the last decade, I'd say. I absolutely love that series, and I really hope that they're able to do more things like that. And this is where we get into the genre talk of the future of the DC universe, where Peter Safran says he doesn't believe superhero stories should be confined to the action-adventure genre. DC has a horror film about Batman villain Clayface that starts shooting next month, and a family animated film in the works about boys who have been Robin called The Dynamic Duo. Gunn and Safran are targeting 1 animated and 2 live-action films a year, as well as TV shows that'll primarily stream on HBO Max. They aim to eventually reestablish all the company's best-known characters, including Batman and Wonder Woman, and unite them in a new Justice League film. I mean, reading this, I do get very excited. Overall, I really am excited for the future of the DC universe. I absolutely loved Superman, and I'm very excited to see not only what they do with the Batman aspect of it all, but generally where the universe goes from here with this insane attention to detail. I feel like we've never really seen a universe at least start off with. But as always, let me know all of your thoughts on the articles and the world's finest conversation we had today in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.